I'm here, son, I'll always be here, you whisper to your son in the ER as he fades in and out of life, a victim of random violence. You promised your partner you would never go back to being a supervillain, however, this time, the world must pay. There must be order. Hannah stared at her dinner plate. She hadn't touched it in over 5 minutes. Her mind still felt lost, not in her control. The worry about her son in the hospital was heavy on her mind, but beneath that concern, a familiar itch was growing. An urge she thought she'd buried. I've never shown you my supervillain suit before, have I, hon? She said, her voice distant. Her husband, Charles, nearly choked on his food as he coughed. A server stepped forward to help, though Charles raised his hand. Leave us, he said, his voice raspy. The various house staff glanced at each other and nodded. Soon, only the wealthy couple remained. Charles stared at his wife, whose face was more distracted than saddened. He stood from his chair and walked across the table to sit beside her. Our son will be fine, Charles said, trying to comfort her. The doctor said his condition is stable. Hannah smiled, but it wasn't the smile Charles was looking for. It was calculating, reminding him of her past self. I know, she said softly. But I can't help thinking. Maybe if I had my old resources, I could do more for everyone. She paused, then added, I think I should show you my costume. Charles cleared his throat, trying to sound assertive. Hannah, you promised you'd never go down that route again. She remembered the promise well. Once her husband found out about her drone program last year, courtesy of a certain guardian leaking it to him, she had sworn she would never control people or be a supervillain again. But now, with her son in danger, it just reminded her how random life could be. Organized chaos. Hannah suddenly stood from her seat, causing Charles to do the same and follow her out of the room. I learned a valuable lesson when I was Mesmer. People are better than robots. I spent all this time trying to turn people into mindless servants when they were better suited as unwitting pawns. Charles ran up to Hannah and stopped her in her tracks. She shot him an annoyed look. Hannah, darling, you don't need to do this. You still have me, your daughter, your business, and soon your son. He clasped his hands and pleaded, I know you're a good person, deep down. Don't do this. Oh Charles, bless his soul. She always found his kindness cute, especially when he had to switch it off to be the ruthless lawyer. I just want to show you my drone suit, Hannah repeated. Is that too much to ask? Charles sighed, his shoulders slumping as he stepped aside. Once Hannah had made up her mind, it was difficult to dissuade her. He followed her to a hidden room in their mansion, a room he thought was locked away for good. As she opened the door, the dim lights flickered on, revealing a descending staircase. Entering the bottom, the couple saw various monitors and mannequins wearing black armor and dark helmets. Charles gulped, remembering when Dash, a member of the Guardians, had told him how people once wore these outfits and acted under Hannah's control. As Charles looked at a drone holding a thick baton, he was taken aback by how the helmet reflected his nervous face. The drone was labeled Super Drone. A snap from Hannah's fingers forced him to look away. He turned and saw Hannah standing before a glass case with her old supervillain suit inside. It was a slim black armor with a business suit and skirt dressed over it. Hannah smiled as she cradled the helmet in her hands. I miss this, she whispered as she sat on a comfy chair and stared into the helmet that reflected her intense gaze. Charles couldn't help but feel forgotten. All right, he cleared his throat and steadied himself as he stood over his wife. You showed me your supervillain suit. Can we go? Hannah ignored him. You can step down, Heather. Charles looked around the small room. Their daughter was here? From one of the stands, a drone stepped down and walked toward the pair. Charles nearly tripped on his feet as the drone stopped. In a smooth motion, the drone took off its helmet, revealing Heather's smiling face. She placed the helmet on a nearby table. Confusion and anger shot through Charles as he turned to Hannah, whose focus was still on her helmet in her lap. What did you do to our daughter? He shouted. The same thing she'll do to everyone in the city, Heather answered, her tone too sweet for Charles' taste as she stepped closer. She grabbed her father's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Mom just wants you to have a taste of what it's like being a drone and not worrying about anything. Let go. Heather did not let go, her gaze locked onto her father. Honey, you have to stop this. Heather slowly shook her head. It was too much. She thought about how Charles disapproved of her actions, her daughter wanting to be a drone, acting as a good philanthropist, and worrying about whether Timothy would get out of the ER. She missed not thinking and letting her drone program do the thinking for her. Heather, sweetie, take your father to the computer and have him watch the video I showed you. Heather's smile widened, sharing her mother's coldness in her eyes as she tightened her grip on her father's arm. Of course, Mom.